I'm Noah Abrams, and welcome to The Days Between, a show where I talk to my friends, people I admire, and people I want to better understand about success, failure, happiness, and misery, as well as all the other elements that make up a life well lived. Along the way, we'll look at mental, spiritual, and physical health, and when life didn't go as planned, the steps they took to get themselves from A to B and beyond. This week, I'm speaking with Bo Bushnell. Bo has had many titles throughout the course of his career, but it's his latest that has certainly brought him the most attention. As the creator of the Outlaw Archive and the Research Institute for Contemporary Outlaws, he has made it his mission to document and record as many living members of the outlaw biker gangs that roamed Southern California in the late 50s and early 60s as he can manage to track down. It was an unsolicited email that set Bo on this path, which has been his singular focus for nearly a decade. A pursuit that has, at times, left him significantly in debt, homeless, and in direct odds with modern-day clubs, including the Hells Angels. Not one who is easily deterred, Bo has approached his task with a tenacity that may defy logic to some, but has also executed it with an intelligence that commands respect by all. Much like the bikers he is chasing, Bo has remained committed to living life on his terms. We discuss his passion for the past, the cost of his obsession, and how a twist of fate has thus far managed to keep him out of harm's way. Bob Dylan once wrote, "To live outside the law, you must be honest," and whether intentionally or not, it appears as though Bo has taken that line to heart. But I'll let you decide that for yourself. Here's Bo Bushnell on The Days Between. I am here in Los Angeles, California, with Bo Bushnell, the creator of the Outlaw Archive, and RICO, the Research Institute for Contemporary Outlaws. Bo, can you describe the room that we are in right now?
I can, but I'd like for you to describe it. That's the whole point, is for when people come by.
Well, I am staring at three panheads. There are various Hells Angels cuts and flags and posters and photos all over the wall. There's 2 Triumph motorcycles behind me. It's quite a collection, and we will get into that in a second. But you are not from Los Angeles originally.
No, I was born in California, Northern California, but grew up in Idaho.
Where in Idaho?
Boise.
Any siblings?
1 sister, 1 half-sister, 2 stepsisters, 2 stepbrothers. My mom was married a lot.
In a 2021 LA Times article, your mother referred to you as mind-blowingly intelligent, but not exactly normal. What did she mean by that?
I was always different.
Different how, though?
Diagnosed with ADD in 3rd grade, was put on a shitload of Ritalin. Grew up in Boise, Idaho in the 1980s and 90s, and it's very isolated. And now it's a legit city. But back then it was like a small town. And my life's always been kind of complicated. My mom was in the Bay Area for a couple of years, and then she ended up with this guy in New York City. So I would spend like summers and Christmas, spring break, either in New York or at his place in Florida. And I was exposed to a lot more than the average person in Boise. And I got into things really early on, like rap music. I was wearing LA Lakers hats, thinking I was Ice Cube when I was like 7, 8 years old. I started buying Lowrider magazine when I was 8. I don't know, just like all these kids I grew up with were very typical small town people. And they looked at me like I was an alien, basically. They didn't understand my life.
Was that difficult?
Yeah. I mean, I was picked on every day until 7th grade. I started skateboarding in like 5th grade, I think. But after 7th grade, I moved to LA.
And that was with your mother?
With my mom, yeah. My mom convinced us to sue our dad to help my mom get custody of us so we could move to California. So we sued our dad, which looking back is just like the worst thing you could do. My dad's the most selfless person on earth. Everything he's done is to benefit other people.
You come to Los Angeles. What was that like for you?
Basically the same as Idaho, but reverse. I went to public school my entire life. In Boise, it doesn't matter, like the Simplots, the Potato Family, and the Albertsons, they went to the same school as the poorest people you can imagine. There wasn't like a private school thing there. It was all public school. From there, I went to Buckley and went to school with like the Hiltons and the Disney family, and it's completely different world.
What did that feel like, though?
I didn't understand at the time. I was just like a shy skater kid and I literally didn't even think about it. But everybody had gone to school together since basically like preschool there. So I was the new kid. So I definitely was unique and different. They hadn't experienced that before, especially somebody from Idaho. But like I said, I went to public school, so like I wasn't prepared for the academic side of things there. Plus, I was so ADD that it didn't even matter. Like whatever my parents tried to do to help me, there was no helping me. I was in my own world. So I definitely struggled with that side of things. The only reason I went to that school is because my stepdad, his kids went there. Otherwise, there's no way I would have been accepted.
When you're in Idaho, did you feel like an outsider?
Yeah, I always felt like an outsider there.
And then when you got to Los Angeles, did you feel like an outsider?
I did, and I didn't. I think later on, I started feeling like an outsider later on when I realized that it was two totally separate worlds. But I was just living in the moment at the time. I cared more about how I was going to find weed and like what skateboard I could get next and how to get it. I didn't care about anything else.
So moving into high school, what was high school like for you?
Well, I left Buckley after a year. I wasn't kicked out, but I was struggling academically. So my mom found this school called Bridges Academy, which was basically for kids with extremely high IQs and learning disabilities.
Did you go to college?
Yeah, I went to Marymount. It was a private 2-year in Palos Verdes. Now it's a 4-year, I guess. I dropped out after a year and a half.
And then what were you doing once you dropped out?
I worked commercials, music videos. I don't even know where to start there. God, that's like 20 lifetimes ago. But
well, how did you get linked up with Brian Ray Turcotte?
that was 2011 or so through Dr. Romanelli. Do you know him? Darren Romanelli. I think it was his birthday or his daughter's birthday out at his dad's house in Malibu. He invited me and I ended up meeting Brian. They had known each other for a while. And right away we just clicked. We were into the same things.
And what kind of stuff?
Skating, music culture, lowriders, anything gang related for the most part.
How did the art of punk come about?
Well, I was producing TV, like docuseries stuff and web series. And I had just finished a series about Ben Baller, the jeweler for all the rappers. And Brian was approached by the people at Mocha because YouTube gave them a bunch of money to start a channel. And they told him to come up with something utilizing his archive and his knowledge. So he came up with the art of punk, and he had never produced anything. And I just happened to be around. So he said, hey, you want to do this thing with me? Didn't even know if it was for sure going to happen, but we put the pitch together and it happened. And it was a pretty amazing experience. We set out to make 3 mini documentaries about the art behind Black Flag, Dead Kennedy, and Crass. So the logos, posters, flyers, T-shirts, all the design. People know the Black Flag logo and Raymond Pettibone's art more than they know the music. And same with Dead Kennedys, and same with the Crass logo, because people just know it stands for something. Rebellion, basically. So we worked with the artists who created the logos for those 3 bands and interviewed members of the bands as well as a couple of like current day, I guess, artists who were inspired by the work. Like Scott Campbell was in one. Crass was his favorite band growing up. I can't think of who else, but he was definitely probably the coolest. He's a tattoo artist for the people that don't know. I hadn't spent a ton of time around Brian. I was going in there, just popping in and out, hanging out for a couple of hours. And I knew that Brian had a massive punk collection, but as I learned more about his collection, it was really inspiring. He has, I don't know, like over 100,000 pieces of punk memorabilia. When I came across my first Outlaw Biker album, I guess part of me thought, well, maybe I can do the same thing that Brian did with punk, but with this world.
You came across the first book of photos, motorcycle photos or outlaw photos, when you were working with Brian?
Yeah.
And how did that come about?
Well, I had started a blog, just my name, bushnell.com, in like 2011. And I would basically post like places that I went and friends, parents, collections, anything from furniture to cars to whatever, cool houses I went to. And I ended up meeting Sonny Barger, or Barger, the founder of the Oakland Hells Angels. It was like a meet and greet in Northern California, actually in Hollister. And I did a post about it. I tagged every motorcycle club I could think of for SEO. But in 2013, I got an email, and the guy said his mom had just passed away and that his parents were in the Straight Satans and that he inherited the club photo album. He thought I was the only one. I did too, I guess, at that time. So I wrote back and said, hey, I don't really collect this stuff, but can you send me some photos? Maybe I know somebody who does. And he said, I'll never digitize this. So I didn't even respond. Just after that, I don't know how, maybe a couple of weeks after that, maybe the same week, I don't know. I went to this zine show called Printed Matter. And there was like some ephemera dealer from Portland that had a box of Crip photos, like Polaroids. And they weren't really on display. They were kind of like in the bottom corner of his display case and all in a box. And
when you say Crip, you're referring to the street gang.
Yeah, like Crips and Bloods. So I asked him about them, and he pulled them out, and I was with Brian. We were both like, this is important. This is crazy. So we talked to the guy for a while, and he hadn't thought about selling them, and he still had some up in Portland. So he wasn't willing to part with them at that second, but we basically had a gentleman's agreement that when he got back to Portland, he would archive all of the photos, scan them and whatnot, and then he would email or call us and we could have them for $2,500. So we're excited, and we think that because we have a lot of mutual friends with this guy, we figure it's a legit deal. Well, we don't hear from the guy. I wasn't really worried, but after like 2 months, I think, or a month and a half, my friend sent me a link to kcal.com, the local like news channel here, and it said 400 Crip Polaroids sell first day of Photo Paris, LA for $45,000. And they were the same photos. So right away, it wasn't about really the money necessarily. Obviously, I couldn't afford $45,000. At the time, I couldn't even afford $2,500. It was Brian putting up the money. But it's one of those things where, like, where else are you going to find that again? I didn't think I would, but now I have 5 times that. But it got me to thinking and searching where, like, how could I find this? So I just became obsessed. Every day I was looking on Craigslist and eBay and going to like flea markets and swap meets all over the place and wasn't finding anything. And after like a month or so, I remembered that email about the Straight Satans. For some reason, it didn't even, I hadn't even thought about it. And I was like, oh, wait, all right, let's see if that guy, if this is for real. So I emailed him and asked if it was still for sale, and he sent me photos of the album, showed them to Brian, and spent probably like 2 months or so negotiating the price. It was still $7,500. And at the time, people were like basically laughing at us, like, who would spend that much money on a photo album? But the thing's amazing. It's like still probably the best photo album I have as far as like the layout, just because like the layering of it, the newspaper clippings and all the photos are labeled and death memorials and just like documenting the crimes they committed. And it's like 100 pages. But when we got that, I became obsessed. Again, I hyper-focus on things. So I went through the entire book and extracted every name I could find and started figuring out what moniker went with what person, and had to teach myself how to be basically a private investigator. I probably made like 2,000 phone calls before I found someone.
Someone from the Straight Satans.
Yeah.
Who were the Straight Satans?
The Straight Satans were an outlaw motorcycle club that Well, they started in Santa Monica in 1959. They are really known for being the club that Charles Manson hung out with. And a couple of them lived up at Spawn Ranch with him and ended up testifying against him. The first guy I found, Droopy, was a straight Satan, and then he joined the Satan Slaves. He was one of Manson's best friends until all that shit went down.
You went through this photo book, pulled out every name that you could find, and then started to try and track these people down?
Yeah. But I had no idea how to do background checks and find people. It wasn't until I peeled back a photo. It was like there's a series of booking photos, like arrest photos in the album. It's like 10 of them or something. And I peeled back Droopy's, and it had his full name and date of birth. So found him and I called him, and he was a little startled at first, but ended up having me over. He had stage 4 cancer. I think he lived for like 9 months after I met him. But when his cancer went to stage 4, he basically stopped allowing his friends to come over. Nothing we talked about, but I just assumed that he didn't want them to see him weak because he was always like a strong guy. He was never like a tough guy. He was still a biker, but I don't know. I guess he just didn't want his friends seeing him in that state. So he drank Coca-Cola instead of water and barely ate. So I would take him food a couple days a week and water, and like make him drink water and talk to him. He told his kids at one point that he liked that I could talk with him about his friends from the 60s as if I was there and as if I knew them.
But why do you think he spoke to you?
Like when you're old and sick, and even if you acknowledge that you're on your way out or not, you still look back at your life and feel nostalgia, especially these guys, because I'm not going to say like they peaked then, because there's a lot of these guys who ended up becoming very successful, not just financially. I don't think that defines success necessarily, but it was just a very important time. And I don't know, I think he just wanted to look back at those days and talk about the fun that they had before things became serious.
Did he introduce you to anyone else?
Yeah. He helped me find a straight Satan named John the Bum. He introduced me to this guy, Howard Gunn, he co-founded the Venice Hells Angels. They were around for about a year. It's crazy because Droopy, he said, when things come in 3, they ain't no good to me. In 1967, his knucklehead motor blew up. And then the next week he was stabbed and was sent to the hospital. And then the following week, his house was red tagged and destroyed by his landlord. The guy would come around to get rent, and Droopy and his friends would basically come to the door and say, fuck off. And the guy tried everything. He removed the toilet from his house at one point, and they just used the hole. So there was this guy named Sam Ferris who wasn't a straight Satan, but he was a local Venice guy and a really, really amazing painter. But he gave Droopy a painting, and when his house was torn down, he had noted, like they gave him notice. So his friends went and took photos of the place first and took whatever they could get. So Howard grabbed this painting for him. And they hadn't seen each other since 1967. They had talked on the phone, but Howard kept that painting for him until I took Droopy to his house in 2014, I think it was. And that's how I met Howard. And he's amazing too. He grew up in Culver City and Venice back in the 40s and 50s. But if you talk to him, you'd think he was from like Oklahoma. He's like a city redneck. He says Washington, and he talks like a good old boy. It's amazing. Through Droopy, I also met Whitey, who was a coffin cheater and then a Laco Hells Angel and a Purdue Hells Angel. I basically cold called him because I saw his name in some newspaper clippings in the first album and asked him if he wanted photos, like copies of photos of his friends. And he was like, why do I want copies of photos? Hell, I've got a shitload of photos. I was like, really? How many? So I don't know, like 1,000? I said, if you really have 1,000, I'll give you $10,000 for them. And he's like, who the hell are you? I said, my name is Bo. I'm friends with Droopy. He's like, I'm going to do some looking into you. Wrote down my name and number. A couple hours later, I get a call. He's like, hey, my name's Doug. I'm friends with Whitey. You need to stop what you're doing right now. You're going to get yourself into trouble. I didn't realize who it was at first until I got off the phone. Then I was like, wait, is that Dougie Poo? Dougie Poo was a Purdue Hells Angel in the 60s, and he was featured in some really amazing photos they were supposed to be in Time Life magazine. They were taken in 1964, but I forget what happened. Some major event took place that they replaced the article with. But in somewhere around like 2011 or so, the photographer Bill Ray put the photos online, and now they're the iconic Hells Angels photos that were on the internet for a long time.
Was it a threat or was it a suggestion?
I didn't know how to take it. I was so new to that world and to the people that I guess I thought it was a threat of some sort.
And so you hang up the phone
and then
realize who you're speaking to.
Yes. Called him back. He's like, what, basically? And I said, hey, I just realized, are you Dougie Poo? He's like, yeah, I am. I was like thinking to myself, wow, this guy's a legend. I said, hey, I know you don't like what I'm doing, but these photos are just amazing. And he goes, well, if you want photos, you got to find Mother Ruth. Well, I've heard her name before, but who is she? Like, what's her real name? He said, I don't know. We've been looking for her for 45, 50 years. And it's weird because why would he suggest that to me? And then right away was like, after that said, all right, so you're going to stop doing what you're doing now. Said, yes, sir. Hung up. And then a couple of months later, Droopy was on his deathbed. And I knew that his family didn't even know where he was. I'm sure at that point, I wasn't in touch with them yet. But so I called Dougie Poo and I said, hey, I know you don't like what I'm doing, but you need to get your friends together and go see Droopy because he's on his way out. And the doctor thinks that he has a couple hours left. So Doug and a bunch of other former angels and slaves went to the hospital. And then Dougie Poo called me the next day and said, Droopy passed away. And he just thanked me for doing that. So for like a year or a little over a year, we talked about getting together. And he kept on, insisted that we get together and look through photos and talk. But for some reason, he kept like making excuses. So it was like some little over a year later that I ended up connecting with him in person. And by that time I had acquired some more archives. I didn't just have that one album. So he was just blown away.
How much of it was about collecting and how much of it was an emotional connection?
Well, it was like 90% emotional.
What was it about these guys for you?
There aren't many of them left. They went through a lot. And I knew that they hadn't opened up to people before. And if they had, it was only to close friends. Every single one of them, they would all say the same thing. When I'd say, hey, tell me some stories, they'd say, well, why? You won't believe me. You won't believe any of them. A lot of these guys didn't tell their kids a lot. Dougie Poo told, like, his son knew pretty much everything about his life back then, but there's a lot of people that just buried that in the past. And they lived in fear because when they left the club, it was at the time when, or whatever club it was, when they wouldn't direct message you on Instagram and threaten you. They wouldn't call you and threaten you. They wouldn't threaten you in person. You would just be gone one day. So they still lived with that mentality and they wanted to protect their family from it. So even if their kids did know that they were in a club, it was like they were raised knowing to not talk about it. So yeah, when they opened up, it was like, yeah, I'll tell you stories, but you're not going to believe me. And I ended up hearing the same stories from multiple people who hadn't seen each other since the 60s. And obviously there's always a different perspective, point of view from two different people. But I know that the reality is somewhere in the middle.
Well, back to Mother Ruth.
Doug didn't know her full name. I told you before that Droopy connected me to John the Bum, who was in the Straight Satans. I couldn't find him because he had been living on a boat since the 60s. He was one of the guys that spent a lot of time up at Spawn Ranch with Manson. He hated Manson, but his best friend from childhood, 86 George, lived up at Spawn Ranch. So John spent quite a bit of time up there. And after the murders, his name was popping up, I guess, to the media and the police as somebody who hung out up there. So he kind of split and lived on a boat. Same thing happened with Droopy, but he moved down to, I guess, North County, San Diego, to get away for a bit, to lay low. What's crazy is that Droopy hadn't seen John since the 60s or talked to him, but he somehow knew that he was living on this boat down in Wilmington by Long Beach. So I go to John's boat after I couldn't find a phone number for him. So I just went down, said, fuck it, let's see if he'll talk to me. So you have to have like a key card to get onto the dock, but I waited for somebody to leave and slipped through, found the boat, knocked on it. And when he opened up the hatch, I thought I was looking at somebody that was like 50 something, but he was 77 or so. Really, really, really nice. Opened up to me right away. Helped me, started telling me who was who in the album. And then after I think I spent like 5 hours with him, but after I'd say probably like an hour and a half, this old guy who looked like a wizard was walking down the dock with a woman. And he said, "Oh, that guy over there used to be a Hell's Angel. He's my neighbor." And I was like, "Oh, well, should I just go talk to him?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." So he kind of yells like, "Hey, Harold, this is my friend Bo." So I walk over and this guy introduces himself as Harold. And he was with his wife named Ruthie. He picked up the album and the Straight Satan's album, looked through it. He was like, "Oh, yeah." Cool. Basically skipped through the entire album to the very back where there's like 8 pages of Purdue Hells Angels photos from the 70s. And he was like, "Oh, these are my friends right here." And he said all of his photos were taken by law enforcement throughout the years. But he was president of the Purdue Hells Angels from, I think, 68, 69 until like 77, 76. So I said, "Well, I can make you copies of these if you want." He's like, "Oh man, I really like that." But he was like very, very guarded. Nice, but guarded. So fast forward like a year, and I had seen him a couple times after that, but it was just like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And he would just nod and walk by, never really stop and have a conversation. But so I'm at Dougie Poo's and we're trying to figure out who Mother Ruth is. And he was like, I asked if he knew anybody that she was married to. He was like, "No, he was kind of like talked to himself for a second. He was like, I think she was married to a Purdue angel named Harold." And I said, "Harold that lives down on the boat?" And he's like, looked at me like, he's like, "How the fuck do you know that?" And I was like, "Long story." So he called him and I asked him if he remembered Ruth's maiden name. Took him a second, but he remembered it. And then I went on Ancestry.com and started doing marriage searches. She'd been married like 7 times or something legally. But that's how I ended up finding her daughters. It was really, really difficult.
So you find her daughters and then...
I find 2 of her daughters in Florida. And they didn't get any of their mom's photos. Their sister Linda did. But they didn't know where Linda lived. They didn't know her phone number. They just knew she lived in LA, about how old she was. Actually, I think they knew how old she was, but they didn't know how to get in touch with her. And out of respect for her privacy, I'm not going to say her last name, but let's just say her name is very generic. So it was like finding a needle in a haystack. When I compiled all the different people with the same name, there were hundreds of them. I made so many phone calls. It was the last or one of the last on the list. And I called and asked for her, and the woman said, "Oh, there's no Linda here." And I was just like exhausted. And for some reason, I didn't just say, "Oh, sorry to bother you." I said, "Really? There's no Linda blank there?" Insert her last name. And she goes, "Oh, Linda, she lives in the back house. She's at work right now." So I left my number and my name, and I said, "Tell her it's about Mother Ruth." When Linda called, she was very curious, obviously, about like what I wanted and who I was. She has worked the same job for like or at the same company for like 25 years. She's a born again Christian, lives a very simple life, does not care about money, does not care about notoriety. She cares about doing the right thing and helping people. So she basically said, I have photos and you can come meet me at my storage unit. She said it was like 3 Sundays from then. I was so anxious. I was like, please say tomorrow. She was like, oh yeah, meet me in 3 weeks at this storage unit and here's the address. And I showed up and Brian Turcott loaned me a bunch of cash just in case. So I go through all these albums and separate all the biker ones from the day-to-day life ones and basically handed her a wad of cash and said, I'll give you this for those photos. And she was like, no, you have the wrong idea. These aren't for sale. I thought you just wanted copies. And I said, no, that's all I can get. Then great. But the whole idea was to preserve the original photos, especially when they're just sitting in a storage unit in the middle of nowhere and nobody's looking at them. So after a couple of hours, I convinced her to let me take half of the photo albums. We drafted a contract. I gave her a copy of my driver's license, and we had a written agreement stating that I would be making copies of those photos, and that if I could contact her sisters in Florida and convince them that I should have the photos without telling them that I had found Linda, then I could have them. So turns out that the sisters in Florida had her P.O. box address, Linda's, but her P.O. box isn't by her house. And it's kind of hard to find somebody with just a P.O. box. So she kept in touch with them. They would write her on holidays instead of saying, hey, Merry Christmas. Well, they would say Merry Christmas, but it was like, hey, Merry Christmas. Could you help me out with $20 type thing? Literally $20. A lot of addiction in the family. There were 4 daughters originally. Barbara was, I think, the second oldest. She died at 18 of a heroin overdose. And when that happened, Linda right away knew never to touch drugs or alcohol again. And her sisters chose the other path. So when we made this agreement, I basically asked Linda, what do you want, financially, just so I could prepare myself. If they said yes. She's like, I don't want anything. The fact that you spent so long looking for my mom is just amazing. Give my sisters money. Don't give them too much, but give them some money. So I flew to Florida and I spent 36 hours with the oldest sister, Mother Ruth's oldest daughter.
What was going on with Bo at this point?
I was spending the little money that I did have on trying to acquire these things. Instead of paying rent or bills, I would buy photo albums. And I had I think it was $70,000 in credit card debt. I sold my car to pay off an American Express bill that I was basically using to float through life, PayPal my friend cash so I could pay off the Amex bill and then have to pay it off again the next month, just kept floating through. I sold my car and started renting a car because my credit was fucked.
You had previous credits. It wasn't like you couldn't have gone and got a job doing something.
I didn't want a normal job. I told myself, in 2009, when shit hit the fan, the housing market, and it affected the rest of the world, I had been vice president of bodybuilding.com and I was running athletes.com for them. And basically in the same, within a couple of months, broke up with my girlfriend of 3 years. My grandpa died. My dad had an aortic dissection and almost died. And I lost my contract with bodybuilding.com. And I needed to go through that, but I also told myself that I would never work for anybody else again. I didn't know what I was going to do.
But you're homeless at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You're living out of a car that you're renting.
Yeah.
Did you have a plan for these photos?
No, I didn't even have a plan for my life. I was living in constant fear, anxiety of how am I going to get out of this? But because of that, everything went to a P.O. box because I didn't have a physical address. Some things went to Brian's office, but basically just mail, no like bills. All my bills went to a P.O. box. So that, in a way, was kind of fate for what was to follow.
I guess that's the point that I'm trying to get to, is that Dougie Poo is telling you, if you want photos, you need to find Mother Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
You go on this journey to find her. You find the photos. At the same time, your life is in flux.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the significance to the project that is yet defined by finding Mother Ruth, but I would assume that there was a significance to your life as well by finding these photos.
In my obsessive mind, yes, but to everyone around me and my family, they all thought I was completely nuts. They had no idea why I would care about photo albums from these people and why I saw any value in them. Not just financial value, but any value. Lost a lot of friends. A lot of them, basically, it was like cutting fat for a lot of it. But a lot of my family I didn't talk to for a couple of years.
But what keeps you going?
The high of finding somebody and hearing their stories. It's hard to explain.
You find Mother Ruth's photo book or books,
Mm-hmm.
and then what?
After 36 hours, I took them to lunch, and I said something along the lines of, hey, if we can find your sister and she has your mom's photos still, can I buy them from all of you guys and I'll make you guys copies? They said, oh, yeah, for sure. So I basically told them to write her P.O. box and tell her that there was this guy named Bo looking for their mom's photos and that Linda should call me. It took them 9 months. And they finally did. And when they did, Linda called me and told me, she said, hey, let's get together. We met at a Denny's at like 8 o'clock at night. And she brought the other half of the photo albums. And I brought a new contract. We voided out the old contract and we both signed a new one that assigned me the copyright and the ownership of the albums. And she included copies of the letters from her sisters saying, there's this guy, Bo, let him have the photos. I said to Linda, what can I do for, like, what can I give you? What can I do for you? And she said, I don't want anything, nothing. And I said, one day these albums could be worth a lot of money. So can I do something for you at any time? Like if there's any time I could do something for you, just let me know. If there's anything you need. She's like, I don't want anything, nothing. I said, but what if these end up at a college or university at some point? Can I put your name on it? She goes, no, I don't want anything. I don't want anything. I'm just happy that you know who the people are in the photos, because she's like, I have no connection to those people. I only knew a couple of them. And she kept 4 of the original photos, which she still has, because 1 was her Uncle Otto, 2 were Harold, who was her stepdad, the guy that lived on the boat next to John the Bum, and 1 was this guy, Wes Page, who was her mom's, I think it was her stepdad at one point too. But she's like, these are the only people I have a connection with. And she just wanted copies of all the photos. So pretty amazing.
What was the response when you released your book, Halfway to Bordeaux?
So when the club caught wind of it, they pulled Dougie Poo and Buzzard. Buzzard's another Hell's Angel from back then, also in the same series of photos. But Buzzard was mentioned several times in Hunter S. Thompson's book, Hell's Angels, and in Tom Wolfe's Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. He was a 60s icon in that world. But they pulled Dougie Poo and Buzzard, the San Fernando Valley Hells Angels, pulled them into a room and said, if this book comes out, we're going to kill you and your families. And these are guys in their late 70s being pulled into a room by a bunch of 30-something wannabe gangsters. And that just pissed me off more than anything. I got threats too. And the book publisher at the time got threats, so much that they breached their contract, and I allowed them to take their name off the book. So I didn't have an Instagram until early 2016 for this. I started this in 2013, but I didn't want to put it out there. I didn't know if there would be a response. I didn't know if people would even care. So when I started one and it took off, all these Hells Angels were following me. And I would get Hells Angels that would DM me and say, oh man, this is so cool. I'd say, give me your address. I'll send you one. And they would post photos of it in their clubhouse. Like, so cool. Got this Bass Lake Run zine from the time my Instagram was at Straight Satans. But when the threats happened, I went at it with the club and called them out for it. And I made it very public.
Called them out for threatening you or called them out for threatening?
I don't give a shit about them threatening me. It was about threatening old men who did nothing wrong. Men who never told me club secrets. They were very careful about how they approached it.
Why wasn't the club doing what you were doing?
My personal opinion, Sonny has wanted to control the narrative of the club since he basically hijacked the club in the mid-'60s. He was pissed off that I gave these guys a platform. And at the time, I wasn't into collecting club colors, really. I had like one set of Straight Satan's colors, and then I had Droopy's Slaves colors without the patch.
What are colors?
The colors, that's the club's name and insignia on a patch. It's the patch on the vest. It's called their colors. And that's what they protect. They kill and die for their colors. So,
and the colors are the property of the club.
Anything that has the club's name or insignia on it is property of the club, so they say. Now, the old timers will disagree because they all say they earned their colors, which they did. They earned it way more than any current day member will ever earn them. They took beatings from, back then it wasn't club versus club really. If it was like a small club that came through town, they would pull their color, pull their patches and beat the dudes up. But it wasn't like Mongols versus Hells Angels. Actually, the Vagos and the Mongols and the Hells Angels, they were all friends back then. It was more like the cops would whoop their ass and jocks would go down to the Hells Angels bars to try to claim that they beat up a Hells Angel. So they were just fucked with constantly every day. So that's why they say that they earn their colors. And the Hells Angels today, they aren't faced with any of those things, I don't think.
Well, what was going on with you emotionally at this point, though? I mean, you're getting threatened by the Hells Angels. You are living in your car. This isn't about the money.
No. Definitely not. And I released the zines basically to like keep me afloat and to buy more stuff.
Any rational person is going to look at a situation like this where your personal living situation is in flux. You are not making money on this venture, or if you are, it's enough to cover the next part of it. And you're being threatened by the Hells Angels.
Yeah.
What's driving you?
It was pure instinct, like survival. And I knew that in the past, anytime any company had ripped off the Hells Angels logo, or anytime anybody had a patch, that the club would sue them or intimidate them to get it back. And they won every time, even when like legally they had no case. But their intimidation, even against a company like Disney, which is crazy, would get them to buckle under pressure and just settle out of court. And I didn't want to be that person. I wasn't going to back off because I didn't feel like I was disrespecting their history. If anything, I was respecting it. I was trying to keep it together. There's a couple chapters of the Hells Angels that definitely have a lot of their history, but they don't necessarily know who the people are. They don't know the timeline. There's chapters that have had boxes of stuff for years that since I started doing this, they've started trying to figure out who's who and what's what. And they like low-key direct message me and ask me who people are still to this day. And I always tell them, and they give me names, I give them names, and it's pretty cool. I get to see some of the archives.
What's been the response to the Instagram and the books outside of the clubs?
Well, outside of the clubs, there's a lot of people that love it and a lot of people that hate it. But if you're doing something, you don't have haters, you're not doing something. I was getting all these guys direct messaging me, threatening me, literally just comment bombing photos on my account, talking shit, and starting Instagram accounts with my personal information on it and my family's personal information. It got pretty hectic for a while.
What do you think it is about outlaw culture, though, that is so fascinating to so many people?
Well, it go back to like the Wild West, Billy the Kid and Jesse James. What's the difference? It's people are always attracted to the anti-hero.
Well, what is it for you?
These guys weren't doing it to be photographed or for popularity. It's who they were. And it's interesting how they all found each other with no social media, no technology whatsoever. Like, think about the phone system back then. What's always been my focus is the late 50s, early 60s. I call it the birth of the outlaw because it was the transition from AMA clubs, American Motorcycle Association clubs, to outlaw clubs. And I'm more interested in that era because the people were and are more authentic.
So what's next for the Outlaw Archive?
I don't know. Every time I get a big archive, I think, how can I outdo this? What's going to happen next? How am I ever going to outdo this? How am I going to find something else comparable? And that's happened since day one, but took one photo album to what I have now. It's like somewhere around 35,000, 40,000 items. We don't know where we're going. Like, the goal is to eventually have some kind of museum. But there's a lot of books to release. We want to do documentaries. I'd really like to do a scripted show based on them to tell the real stories because they're way, way more fascinating than Sons of Anarchy or Mayans or any writer could ever come up with. It's just like all these old timers said. They said I wouldn't believe them when they told me these stories, and if I hadn't have talked to multiple guys, then I wouldn't believe them. And they don't involve murder or weapons or any of that. Just the ridiculous things that they did back then, when you could get away with a lot more.
How do you define success?
Success is, I think, living the life that you want to live, having at the end of the road, having no regrets. I'm not saying like, if you're a killer and you have no regrets at the end of the day, no, that's not successful. But I think a person that has a really unique and amazing story to tell at the end of their life, I think that's successful because what happens to your money when you die? Yeah, it goes to your family. It's great that they're taken care of. But what does it do for you? For certain people, it carries their name on. Obviously, Elon Musk and Bill Gates, people like that. But for the people that don't become billionaires or don't become famous, I think their stories can carry on. And I think that defines success in a weird way.
Are you successful on your terms?
No, I'm not, because I'm really hard on myself and there's a lot I want to do. And I feel like I should be doing a lot more. Even when I work 18 hours a day, I don't know.
How do you define failure?
Failure is living by society's rules. That's what I think. I think that's basically giving up, not having the balls to do what makes you happy, and you have basically no identity. That's, to me, failure.
Can you think of a personal or professional failure that ultimately set you up for success?
During the time when I was homeless, by default, everything had to go to that P.O. box. And that really helped out later on when I started getting threats from different clubs because everything still goes to a P.O. box. I have an investor now. His name's out there, but he's really done nothing wrong. At the end of the day, if the clubs want to do anything, I surely hope they would do it to me and not anybody else. But nothing's under my name, so they can't find me. And it's all because of that P.O. box and needing it. It's out of necessity because I was homeless. Crazy.
How do you define happiness?
I don't know. I can't define it because I don't know if I've ever been truly happy. I know that's probably a really strange answer, but I don't know. I think a happy person is someone who can go against society's rules, but at the same time not have clutter in their mind. And because of what I do, my mind is constantly cluttered. anytime I find somebody, just one person, it's like a very complex math equation in my head. I've been in a race against time because these guys are a lot of them are dead now, but when I started this, I knew that they were going to die, so I had to find them first. And I still do. I'm still every day hoping that I find somebody else, because it's one thing to hear their story from their family or from a friend, but to hear their personal story from them is obviously much better. And their friendship is, you can't fake that. You can't replace that. But anyway, so yeah, my mind is constantly going. I've always had anxiety. It's not fear of the Hells Angels or any club. It's just I've always had anxiety. Yeah, so to have a clear mind, and I wish I could meditate or relax, but it's almost impossible. So I can't be happy.
Do you see yourself at all in these guys that you're chasing?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
How so?
They lived their life on their terms, the way they wanted. And I think I've done that. And my grandpa did that. He basically was like my role model in life, because he came from nothing, picking peas for 10 cents a day, has 2 Purple Hearts from Battle of the Bulge in World War II, and created entire towns in Idaho, and was a huge collector. Like, people think that I am some trust fund kid. It's funny because I'm not. I'm I have no trust fund. I have no, my parents don't help me at all.
What would you say to 18-year-old Bo?
Control your temper. I don't know. My mouth definitely gets me in trouble, but that's because I have no filter and I stand up for myself. I don't know. I don't know what I would tell myself. I definitely wouldn't. There's very few things I would change in my life. I think it's going as it's supposed to. I don't know where it's going. I could be homeless again next year. Who knows? Nothing's guaranteed.
How would you describe what you do for a living?
I'm a curator, archivist, historian, book publisher, documentarian, cultural anthropologist. I don't know, there's a lot of things, and most people kind of brush it off at first until they see my Instagram usually, or photos of my warehouse. When I try to explain what I do, I pull out my phone and I'm like, all right, well, this is my headquarters and these are the things. And they're like, why do you have a walk-in bank vault and collectible furniture? And how? People are very confused.
Bo Bushnell, thank you for speaking with me.
Thank you.
The Days Between is a production of Noah Abrams Studio. Story editing by Andrew Henry. Mixing and mastering by Todd Stapera and reference recording. Website design by John Fisher. Theme music is by Evo. The Days Between can be found online at www.thedaysbetweenpodcast.com and on Instagram at The Days Between Podcast. My name is Noah Abrams. Thanks for listening.